Flickering light reveals a whispered crime. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I value you. Let's begin. It was 10 minutes past 11 on a Tuesday when Fritz Brenner knocked on the office door with the discretion of a man who could carry a soup tureen in one hand and a secret in the other. "Mr. Archie," he said, voice soft, eye steady. "A lady is here." I had been balancing check stubs and irritation, an art I practice with more devotion than Wolfe admits exists. And I didn't look up right away. Fritz's "a lady" could mean anything from a socialite who thought detective was a synonym for confessor, to a nervous bride with a fiancé like a tax line. But there was something in Fritz's face. Not alarm. Fritz never alarms. And more like a polite acknowledgement that our day had just been rearranged without permission. "In the front room?" I asked. "Yes. She says it is urgent, and she will not leave." That last bit was the hook. People who won't leave have either nowhere else to go or too much to gain by sitting tight. Either way, they're never easy. And Wolfe, the only man I know who considers his own chair a sovereign nation, does not appreciate invasions. "Wolfe's upstairs," I said. "Orchids?" Fritz nodded. "He is with them." That meant the sanctity clock was running. Wolfe's orchid hours are not merely scheduled. They're consecrated. I put down my pen, adjusted my tie, and went out. The front room had its usual calm. The heavy furniture, the curtains that made the daylight behave, the faint smell of polished wood and Fritz's good taste. Now the woman stood instead of sitting, which struck me as either nerves or a declaration. She wasn't young. Late 30s, maybe, tall enough to make most men reconsider interrupting her, with dark hair pinned up like it had been told to be quiet and obeyed. The suit was plain but not cheap, and her hands were bare, which in New York says either "I'm in a hurry" or "I'm not accustomed to being seen." She turned when I came in, and her eyes did the first quick inventory: height, build, confidence level. My eyes did the same. Fair trade. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe's assistant." "Mr. Wolfe is busy," she cut in. "Not rude, just efficient." "I know. That's why I came now. If I wait, I won't come at all." That was interesting. People usually come to us because waiting made things worse. So she had the opposite fear. That time would give her courage second thoughts. "Name?" I asked. "Celeste Quan." She said it like she expected it to matter, and I filed it away. Quan, Chinese maybe. The face was not clearly anything except controlled. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe." "You can speak to me," I said. "Often that's enough to tell us whether you'll get to speak to him." Her mouth tightened. "He won't trust you." That got me smiling despite myself. That's refreshing. Usually it's the other way around. She didn't bite. This is not a matter for a messenger. I leaned a shoulder against the mantel, relaxed enough to be insulting. "That's his decision. Tell me what you've got, and I'll decide whether to risk his temper and your time." She looked past me, not at the furniture, but at the room, as if the room itself had a reputation. And then she said, "Something is wrong in this house. That, in the brownstone, is a sentence that can start a war." I stopped smiling. "Wrong how?" "In a small way," she said quickly, like she didn't want to sound melodramatic. "Not a burglary, not vandalism, but touched." Touched. She said it with distaste. I was about to tell her she had been reading too many Gothic novels when the doorbell rang, short, impatient. Fritz would get it. I listened anyway. Habit. Celeste Quan lowered her voice. "I was here 3 days ago. I spoke to Mr. Wolfe. I left something with him." That got my attention in a way that's hard to fake. If she'd spoken to Wolfe without my knowing, it meant she'd slipped in during orchid hours or at a time I'd been out. Either way, Wolfe doesn't see people without a reason. He might deny it, but he does. "First, what did you leave?" I asked. A candle, she said. I waited a beat, because my brain had to check if it heard right. A candle. Yes. She held my eyes now. A beeswax candle, about 8 inches. Plain. No scent. Nothing unusual. Fritz's steps approached from the hall, then stopped, then continued toward the front door. The bell had rung again, more insistently. A candle is unusual enough in a detective's office, I said. Why did you leave it? Because it's proof, she said, and the way she said proof made me believe she believed it. And because I couldn't bring the rest. It's too dangerous. My neck started itching, which is my private warning system. Proof of what? I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe, she repeated, but now it wasn't a demand. It was a plea tucked into the same words. Fritz returned, but didn't enter the room. He paused in the doorway like a man weighing whether to interrupt a prayer. Mr. Archie, he said softly. Mr. Kramer is here. That made the day turn on its heel. Inspector Kramer doesn't ring our bell twice unless he's either furious or desperate. Sometimes both. I felt the muscles in my back tighten. Send him in, I said, and to Celeste Kwan. Stand by. She didn't move. She didn't sit. She held her position like a chess piece waiting for the opponent's move. Kramer came in like a man who had been arguing with traffic and losing. His hat was shoved too far back, his coat hung open, and his eyes, when they landed on me, did not contain affection. Goodwin, he growled. Inspector, I said. Always a pleasure. He snorted, then saw Celeste Kwan, and his face did a small shift. Recognition or suspicion. I'd learn which. Who's she? Client, I said casually, which was at least half a lie and therefore my usual. Kramer jabbed a thumb toward the hall as if the rest of the house offended him. Where's the fat one? Upstairs, I said, with his orchids. Get him down here, Kramer said. Now. I tilted my head. That depends. If you've come to arrest Fritz for poisoning your lunch again, you can save the trip. If you've come to complain about Wolfe's bill, take a number. If you've come because you need something, you might try manners. Kramer's face reddened, but he didn't waste time on my standard misbehavior. There's been a death. That word has a way of moving furniture. The front room seemed to lean in. Celeste Kwan made a sound, not a gasp, just a small involuntary release, like air leaving a bottle. Kramer saw it, for his eyes narrowed. Yeah, you? She stiffened. Me? You were at the scene, he said. Don't play innocent. The clerk at Harlow and Sloane saw you that morning. Harlow and Sloane meant nothing to me at the moment. It would. Things always do. What scene? I asked. Kramer ignored me and kept his stare on Celeste Kwan. Walter Harlow is dead. In his office, throat cut with a letter opener. You were in the building, Kwan. What were you doing there? Celeste Kwan's face went pale in a controlled way, as if she'd practiced not showing fear in front of mirrors. I wasn't in his office. Didn't say you were, Kramer snapped. I said you were there. I watched her closely. The reaction wasn't guilt. It was the kind of shock that comes when the bad thing you feared arrives, just not in the shape you expected. I came to speak to him, she said carefully. He refused. That's all. Kramer turned to me. You hear that? She came to speak to him, and now he's dead, and she's here. Your boss got a reason to collect trouble like stamps. My boss doesn't collect anything, I said, except orchids and enemies, but those are usually free. Kramer's jaw worked. I'm not here for comedy. I'm here because Wolfe's name came up. That was the second hook, and it sank deeper. My boss's name comes up when you step on a tack, I said. Who mentioned him? Walter Harlow, Kramer said. Or what's left of his schedule did. There was an appointment written in pencil, NW 4:30. Today, in Wolfe's handwriting. That would be impressive, since Wolfe doesn't write appointments in other men's books, unless... I looked at Celeste Quan. She held my gaze, and when I saw something flicker there, relief, maybe, that Wolfe was indeed involved, or dread that he would be. Kramer said, "So now you're going to get him, Goodwin, or I'm going to go up there and do it myself." "You do that," I told him pleasantly, "and you'll meet Mr. Wolfe's wrath and Fritz's disapproval in the same minute. I wouldn't wish that on you. I would, but I'm trying to be polite." I walked past him into the hall. Fritz was already there, hovering, worried in his quiet way. "Fritz," I said, "tell Mr. Wolfe Inspector Kramer is here. Also tell him there's been a murder." Fritz's eyes widened a fraction, which for Fritz is like a trumpet blast. "Yes, Mr. Archie." He went up the stairs like the word murder had changed the angle of every step. I returned to the front room and stood between Kramer and Celeste Quan, mostly because I've learned that when Kramer is in a mood, he can interrogate a lamp and make it confess. If she was truly our client, or even our problem, I wanted Wolfe to take the first bite. "Sit down," I told her. "No," she said. "Suit yourself," I said. "Inspector, do you want coffee? Fritz makes a better one than your precinct does." Kramer's eyes stayed hard. "She's coming with me." "She's standing in my employer's front room," I said. "That makes her temporarily protected by tradition and expensive upholstery." Kramer opened his mouth to object. Then the sound from upstairs came, the slow, deliberate tread that meant Wolfe was descending, not hurrying. Wolfe does not hurry for murder any more than he hurries for fire. He hurries only for food. And even then, he calls it moving efficiently. He appeared at the top of the stairs like a large, dignified judgment. Fritz was behind him, anxious. Wolfe's face was set in its usual expression of affronted intelligence, as if the world had again failed to be orderly. He came down, each step a statement of ownership, and entered the office. He looked first at Kramer, then at me, then at Celeste Quan. The eyes were calm, but the attention was sharp. Wolfe doesn't move, but his mind darts like a cat. "Mr. Kramer," he said, voice deep and measured, "you are an intrusion." Kramer's shoulders lifted. "Wolfe, there's been a murder." "I'm informed," Wolfe said. He sat in his chair with the satisfaction of a man returning to his throne. "Your report is redundant." Kramer glared at me as if I'd spoiled the surprise. "Walter Harlow's dead. And your name was in his book." Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ah, that was all." "Ah, Wolfe can pack an encyclopedia into that syllable." Kramer leaned forward. "Explain." Wolfe looked at him, unblinking. No. For a second, the room held its breath. Even the curtains seemed to pause in their attempt to soften daylight. Kramer's face got red again. "No?" "No," Wolfe repeated, as if explaining arithmetic to a child. "You are a policeman. Your methods are crude, your assumptions often erroneous, and your presence in my home is intolerable. You will state what you want, and you will do so without bluster." Celeste Quan's lips parted slightly. She had never seen Wolfe in the flesh, or if she had, she hadn't seen him turn his full weight of disdain on a man in authority. It can be educational. Kramer's hands flexed. "I want her," he said, not to pointing at Celeste Quan. "And I want to know why you had an appointment with Harlow." Wolfe's gaze shifted to Celeste Quan. "Madam," he said, "you are again in my house. That is regrettable." She swallowed, then, "Mr. Wolfe, I came because—" Wolfe raised a hand, palm outward. Not a gesture of interruption, but of control. "You will wait." She obeyed, and I noted it. People obey Wolfe more readily than they obey cops. It's a talent or a curse, depending on whose side you're on. Wolfe addressed Kramer. "You will not take anyone from my house without cause, I acknowledge. If you believe you have legal cause, you may attempt it. The result will be disagreeable." Kramer's mouth twisted. "You threatening a police inspector?" Wolfe's tone didn't change. I'm describing consequence. Threat is your habit, and not mine. I was enjoying myself when I remembered there was a dead man with a cut throat, which tends to dampen amusement. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. Archie. Yes. 3 days ago, he said, this lady left in my care an object that displeased me. You will retrieve it. My eyes flicked to Celeste Quan. The candle. Wolfe continued, It was in my desk drawer. This morning I found it absent. That sentence landed like a brick in a teacup. Kramer blinked. What? I felt the itch in my neck turn into a proper warning flare. Something taken from Wolfe's desk drawer is not a petty theft. It's a violation. It's a declaration of war. Wolfe's gaze locked on Celeste Quan, and the calm in his eyes became something colder. Now, he said, you will tell me, madam, why you brought a candle into my house, and why, having done so, you have allowed my house to be touched. Celeste Quan's composure wavered for the first time. She drew in breath, held it, then said, Because that candle spoke in shadows. Kramer made a sound, half laugh, half snort. Wolfe did not react. I said, Spoke how? She looked at me, then back at Wolfe. It isn't superstition, she said quickly. It's strategy. Someone used it to communicate without paper, without ink, without sound. It's how they planned what happened to Walter Harlow. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Planned what happened? She met his stare, and when she answered, her voice was steady again, but lower, heavier. Not his death, she said. His ruin. The death wasn't supposed to happen. Wolfe leaned back in his chair a fraction, and I knew that for reasons he would not state, he had just decided to take the case. Fully, absolutely, arm in on his own terms. Kramer barked, What the hell is this? Tricks with candles. Wolfe ignored him. He said to me softly, Archie, the sanctity of this house has been violated. That is intolerable. He looked at Celeste Quan. Madame, you will remain. Mr. Kramer, you will also remain, if you can restrain yourself from brutality. Kramer's jaw dropped. You think you can order me? Wolfe's voice sharpened, still quiet. I think, sir, that you are in need. You have a dead man, a penciled appointment, and a woman you suspect but do not understand. If you depart now, you will learn nothing. If you stay, you may, if you are fortunate, witness competence. Then Wolfe did something rare enough that I sat up straighter. He smiled. Not warmth. Wolfe doesn't do warmth. It was a small, grim curve of satisfaction. Archie, he said, we will recover the candle. I said, and after that? Wolfe's smile faded. After that, he said, we will discover who presumed to enter my desk, and we will make him regret the presumption. Outside, the city kept doing what it always does, honking, hustling, pretending that murder and betrayal are just background noise. Inside the brownstone, where order is supposed to reign and the only permitted intrusions are orchids and invoices, a candle had vanished. And in Nero Wolfe's world, that was enough to justify intellectual war. Kramer sputtered, but Wolfe had already disengaged from him, which is Wolfe's version of handcuffs. He closed his eyes, not in thought but in dismissal, and turned his head a fraction toward me. Archie, he said, before this becomes intolerable, I'll remove Inspector Kramer's attention from our guest. That was Wolfe speak for Babysit the Bull. I stepped neatly into Kramer's line of sight and smiled with professional cheer. Inspector, I said, why don't we all take a breath? You look like a man who's about to say something that'll get him barred from a brownstone with excellent coffee. I don't need coffee, he snapped. That's what people always say right before they do. I gestured toward a chair. Sit. You'll get more answers sitting than lunging. Kramer glared, but he sat. The chair creaked under him like it resented the association. Celeste Quan remained standing. Wolfe noticed, You may sit, he told her. She hesitated a fraction of a second, then chose the chair nearest the door. An exit-minded decision. Smart. Wolfe clocked it too. Now, Wolfe said, opening his eyes again, we will impose order. Madame, you brought me a candle. You claim it was proof. Proof of what, precisely? She folded her hands in her lap. They were steady now, but that steadiness had effort behind it. Of collusion, she said. Of planning. Of a method used by Walter Harlow and others to communicate without leaving a trail. Kramer snorted. You expect me to buy that people were passing secret messages with scented candles? No scent, she said immediately. That's the point. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Continue. She took a breath. Walter Harlow was a partner at Harlow and Sloan. Publicly, it was a financial consultancy. Privately, it specialized in repositioning assets. Kramer grunted. Say theft. Say theft with consent, she replied coolly. Clients who wanted money to disappear. Offshore shells, false losses, and manufactured liabilities. Everything legal enough to delay prosecution and dirty enough to destroy anyone who tried to expose it. And you, I asked, where do you fit in? She looked at me. I designed their internal security. That got a reaction. Kramer leaned forward again, slower this time. Wolfe merely inclined his head, granting permission for the fact to exist. I'm a cryptographic systems consultant, she went on. Not codes with letters and numbers, behavioral codes. Patterns that hide in plain sight. Harlow hired me to ensure that sensitive coordination couldn't be reconstructed after the fact. Wolfe said, and you regret your competence. Yes, she said softly, because I realized what they were planning. Kramer jumped on it. Planning murder? No, she said again, firm. Ty's planning to ruin a man named Daniel Sloan. That name landed differently. Kramer stiffened. I saw recognition. Wolfe noted it without comment. Sloan was Harlow's partner, she continued. But he wanted out. He discovered irregularities. Clients who didn't exist. Transactions that never settled. He was going to the authorities. And Harlow wanted to stop him, I said. Yes. Without killing him. Killing draws attention. Ruin doesn't. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Explain the candle. She nodded, as if grateful to return to solid ground. The candle is beeswax, because beeswax burns clean and evenly. When you pass a thin metal blade, heated just enough over the surface, you can create shallow depressions. They're invisible until the candle is lit. Then the melt pattern changes. Shadows appear on nearby surfaces, and the shadows form symbols. Kramer stared. You're kidding. I'm not, she said. I designed the system. Each symbol corresponds to a directive. Delay, advance. Cancel, escalate. The candle doesn't carry words. It carries timing. Wolfe murmured. Elegant and contemptible. I said, so Harlow used this to coordinate with someone. With several someones, she said. Meetings where nothing was written, nothing spoken. Just a candle on a desk. The flame did the talking. And the candle you gave Wolfe? I asked. She swallowed. It was one of Harlow's. I took it from his office when I realized the plan had shifted. Shifted how? Wolfe asked. They were no longer content with ruining Sloan, she said. They decided to make him take the fall for everything. Kramer cursed under his breath. That explains the forged records we found. No accounts in Sloan's name. And the murder, I said. She shook her head. That wasn't part of it, I'm certain. Harlow was meticulous. Violence was never his preference. Wolfe's voice was mild. Yet he is dead. Yes. And the candle vanished from my desk, Wolfe said. Her eyes flicked to him. Someone followed me. That tightened the room. Even Kramer stopped moving. I suspected it, she went on. After I left here 3 days ago, I didn't know who. But someone knew I'd given you the candle. Someone who understood its importance. Why give it to Wolfe? I asked. Because I needed someone who wouldn't panic, she said, and who couldn't be intimidated. And because if anything happened to the candle while it was in my possession, I'd be dead already. Kramer barked a humorless laugh. You still might be. Wolfe ignored him. When did you last see Walter Harlow alive? This morning, she said. Briefly, in the hallway. He looked relieved. Relieved? I echoed. Yes, as if something had gone according to plan. Wolfe's fingers tapped together once. And yet within hours, he was dead. Kramer stood abruptly. That's enough. She's coming with me. No, Wolfe said. Kramer rounded on him. I've heard your games, Wolfe, but I'm done. Wolfe's voice cut cleanly through the room. Inspector, if you remove this woman now, you will commit a professional error of exceptional magnitude. Kramer froze. You threatening my career now? I'm informing it, Wolfe replied. The murder of Walter Harlow is not the central crime. It is an interference. With what? I asked. With a larger design, Wolfe said. One that required secrecy, timing, and a candle. He looked at Celeste Kwan. The candle was removed from my desk because its shadows would incriminate someone still at liberty. She nodded slowly. Yes. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, you will go to Harlow and Sloane. You will observe. You will not provoke. You will discover who had access to Harlow's office after his death and before the police secured it. Kramer snapped, like hell he will. Wolfe raised a hand. Inspector, you will permit this because you will realize, eventually, that you have no alternative. Kramer stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled through his nose. You're enjoying this? No, Wolfe said. I am irritated. Someone has entered my desk. That settled it. Kramer grabbed his hat. Fine, Goodwin can sniff around. But if he crosses a line, I will not, I said cheerfully. I'll just look at the lines already crossed. Wolfe turned back to Celeste Kwan. You will remain here. Fritz will see to your comfort. She looked uncertain. Am I safe? Wolfe considered the question. Safer than you were an hour ago. That was as close to reassurance as he gets. I headed for the door, coat already in hand. As I reached it, Wolfe's voice stopped me. Archie. Yes? Recovering the candle is not the objective, he said. Identifying the hand that removed it is. I grinned. Understood. The candle didn't walk out by itself. No, Wolfe said softly, but someone believed it could still speak. The elevator at Harlow and Sloane was one of those polished brass contraptions that tried to look reassuring while quietly judging you. It rose with the patience of a man billing by the hour, and I used the time to replay Wolfe's last sentence in my head. Identifying the hand that removed it is. Not who killed Harlow, not yet. That told me something. Wolfe already suspected the murder was a side effect, not the aim. The doors opened on the 12th floor, and the atmosphere changed the way it does when money has recently panicked. Voices were low, shoes moved carefully, and everyone looked like they were trying not to leave fingerprints on their own expressions. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect posture and imperfect eyes, looked up as I approached. Yes, she said, tone neutral but alert. Archie Goodwin, I said. I'm expected. That was true in the sense that someone always expects me, eventually. She hesitated, then picked up the phone, murmured, listened, and gestured me through. Mr. Sloane will see you. Daniel Sloane's office was immaculate in the way only a man trying to survive scandal can manage. No personal photos, no clutter, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a window framing the city like evidence. Sloane himself stood when I entered, early 40s, lean, tired in a way that suggested he hadn't slept since innocence was still plausible. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Nero Wolfe's assistant. You say that like it's contagious, I replied. Mind if I sit? He nodded, then sat himself, fingers laced tightly. Inspector Kramer told me Wolfe was involved. That's not quite how it works, I said. Wolfe doesn't get involved. Things collide with him. Sloane's mouth twitched despite himself. I suppose that's accurate. You were scheduled to meet Walter Harlow today, I said. Yes. And instead, he said quietly, he was dead. I let that hang, watching his eyes. Grief was there, but tangled with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or anticipation. Who else knew about the appointment? I asked. Only a few, he said. My executive assistant, Harlow's assistant, and our compliance officer. I filed that away. Names? Marjorie Vane, Elliot Rook, and Paul Hetheridge. The door behind me opened softly. A man entered without looking at me. Mid-50s, conservative suit, face like a practiced apology. Daniel, he said. The police are still... Oh. This is Archie Goodwin, Sloane said. From Nero Wolfe. Paul Hetheridge's eyes flicked to me, then away. Too fast. Of course. Compliance officer, I asked. He nodded. Yes. Meaning you make sure nothing illegal happens, I said. Well, in theory, he replied carefully. And in practice? In practice, I document my objections. I smiled. That must get tiring. It does, he said, and there was no humor in it. Sloane stood. Paul, could you give us a moment? Hetheridge hesitated, then left, closing the door gently behind him. Gently is a word that always makes me suspicious. You're aware, Sloane said, lowering his voice, that the police believe I was the intended target. Yes, I said. And you're aware someone tried to make that belief stick. His jaw tightened. Yes. Walter Harlow, I said, had a habit of communicating indirectly. Sloane's eyes narrowed. So I've learned. Candles, I added. That did it. His composure cracked, not shattered, just fissured, enough to see what lay underneath. I never understood the full mechanism, he said slowly, only that it existed, that it was clever. And deniable, I said. Yes. I leaned back. Someone removed a candle from Nero Wolfe's desk. That landed harder than Harlow's name. Sloane's hands unclasped, then relaced. That's impossible, he said. Nothing's impossible, I replied. Just inconvenient. The door opened again, this time without knocking. A woman entered. 40-ish, sharp eyes, sharper suit. She carried a tablet like it was a shield. Daniel, she said. The auditors are asking... She stopped when she saw me. Who's this? Archie Goodwin, Sloane said. Marjorie Vane. Executive assistant, I said. You keep the wheels on. And the brakes, she replied crisply. Were you in the office this morning? I asked. Yes, she said. Most of it. Did you see Walter Harlow? No, and I heard he was in early. Anyone unusual? I pressed. She hesitated, then shook her head. No. I didn't push. Hesitations are more valuable when you let them mature. Mr. Goodwin, Sloane said, what exactly is Nero Wolfe investigating? I stood. At the moment, a trespass. A trespass, he echoed. Someone entered his desk, I said. That's a line you don't cross unless you think the alternative is worse. Marjorie Vane's tablet shifted in her hands. Hetheridge's door remained closed. The office felt like a room where everyone had just learned the floor plan included traps. I'd like to see Walter Harlow's office, I said. Sloane nodded. Of course. The office was cordoned off, but not sealed. Police tape does a lot of symbolic work, but not much else. The air smelled faintly of metal and polish. The desk was neat, his drawers partially opened, contents catalogued and disturbed with bureaucratic care. I stood where Harlow would have stood, then where he would have sat. I imagined a candle on the desk, flame steady, shadows creeping up the wall. "Who cleaned this?" I asked. "No one," Sloane said. "The police instructed us not to." "Good," I said. "Who ignored that?" He didn't answer, but Marjorie Vane did, from the doorway. "Elliot Rook." That name again. "Assistant?" "Yes," she said. "Walters. He insisted on straightening things." I smiled thinly. Straightening is a dangerous impulse. "Where is he now?" I asked. "At lunch," she said. "Across the street." "Convenient," I murmured. I crouched by the desk, scanning the surface. There. Almost nothing, but not quite nothing. A faint smear on the wood, circular, shallow. The beeswax leaves a signature if you know how to look. Someone had moved the candle. Recently. I straightened. "Thank you for your time," I said to Sloane. "Tell Inspector Kramer I'll be in touch." As I stepped into the hall, my phone buzzed. "Wolfe." "Yes?" I said. "I trust," Wolfe said calmly, "that you have discovered the identity of at least one person who believes himself capable of tidying my affairs." "I have a short list," I said, "and one assistant with an urge to straighten." "Excellent," Wolfe replied. "Return when you're ready. The candle will lead us home." I looked back at the office door, at the tape, at the city beyond the glass. Someone had tried to erase a shadow. They'd picked the wrong house to do it in. When I was across the street from Harlow and Sloane, there was a place called Mariette's that served salads the size of manhole covers to people who wanted to feel virtuous while committing crimes. I crossed on a green light that had the frail, apologetic look of a light that knows it can't protect you, and went in. Lunch hour was in full swing. Low talk, clink of cutlery, the soft panic of professionals pretending to relax. I scanned faces the way you do when you're looking for a man who tidies other people's desks. Neat hair, neat tie, neat lies. Elliot Rook was at a corner table, alone, with a bowl of soup and a stack of napkins arranged like he'd been rehearsing a folding technique. He wasn't young, mid-30s maybe, good-looking in the careful, symmetrical sense. And he held his spoon with the caution of a man who thought the soup might accuse him. I approached like I belonged there, which I did, if you count trouble as membership. "Elliot Rook?" I asked. He looked up, eyes flicking over my suit, my posture, the fact that I hadn't been invited. "Yes." "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe." That name did what it does. It didn't make him flinch. Rook was too practiced for flinching. But it shifted his breathing, a tiny change you'd miss if you weren't trained by a man who notices the angle of a cufflink. "I don't know anything about Nero Wolfe," he said quickly. "Sure you do," I replied, sliding into the chair opposite him without waiting for permission. "You know he's expensive, immovable, and allergic to nonsense. You also know that if I'm sitting here, it's because something you did this morning mattered." His lips tightened. "I was at the office." "So I heard. And you took it upon yourself to straighten Mr. Harlow's desk." "I didn't touch evidence," he said, and his tone had the righteous edge of someone who's been practicing that sentence since the police arrived. I smiled. "That depends on what you consider evidence." He stared at his soup as if it might provide counsel. "Walter hated disorder. He would have—" "Walter is dead," I said pleasantly. "So we can stop worrying about his preferences and start worrying about yours." He swallowed. "Why are you here?" "Because something vanished from Nero Wolfe's desk," I said. That finally got him. Not a big reaction, no spilled soup, no choking, but his eyes widened a fraction and then narrowed. The narrowing came too late. Of the widening had already happened. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Then you're going to be relieved," I told him, "because I'm going to explain it in small words. A beeswax candle was left with Wolfe. It disappeared. Someone who knew about it removed it. You were in Harlow's office after he died. You like to tidy. That makes you interesting. Rook's fingers tightened on his spoon. This is insane. It's Manhattan, I said. Insane is the cover charge. He took a breath. I didn't remove anything from Nero Wolfe's desk. I didn't say you did, I said. I said you're interesting. His gaze darted to the entrance, then back to me. That dart was the first honest thing he'd done. Look, he said, lowering his voice. You don't understand what you're stepping into. Try me. He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. Walter had enemies. He made promises he couldn't keep. People wanted him silenced. Sure, I said, but he wasn't silenced. He was opened like a letter. Rook's jaw clenched. I didn't kill him. I held up a hand. That's not the question yet. The question is, who told you about the candle? His eyes snapped to mine. For the first time, the neatness slipped and something raw showed through. Fear, yes, but also resentment. A man afraid and offended is usually being used. No one, he said, too fast. I nodded as if accepting it. Then I said, your right cuff has wax on it. He froze. I hadn't seen wax on it, not exactly. But I'd seen the way his right hand kept drifting toward his sleeve, rubbing lightly, as if trying to erase a sensation. That's enough. People hear what they fear. He looked down, then back up, face tight. That's not proof, I agreed. Not yet. He pushed his bowl away, appetite gone. What do you want from me? A name, I said. Who told you Walter had some clever method? Who hinted there was something in play that needed to be retrieved? Rook's eyes went glassy with calculation. If I tell you, I'm dead. If you don't, I said, you might be dead anyway, but at least you'll be dead with a secret. That's very tidy. He barked a short laugh, one sharp sound. You're enjoying this. No, I said. I'm working. He stared at the napkins he'd arranged, then crumpled the top one in his fist as if it had offended him by being too white. Paul Hetheridge, he said. That was the compliance officer, the man with the practiced apology. What did he say? I asked. Rook's voice dropped. After the police came, he pulled me aside. He told me to be careful. That Walter kept insurance. Something small, something that could implicate others. He said if I saw anything unusual, anything that didn't belong, I should secure it. Secure it, I repeated. Rook nodded. He didn't say candle. He didn't say Wolfe. But he said insurance, and then he said, if Wolfe's involved, it's bigger than you. That was a peculiar sentence for a compliance officer to say. Compliance officers don't name-drop Wolfe unless they've been burned by him or hired by him, and Hetheridge wasn't the type Wolfe hired, which meant Hetheridge was the type who feared him. And did you see anything unusual? I asked. Rook's mouth tightened. I saw a mark on the desk, like something round had sat there, and there was a faint smell. Beeswax, I said. He blinked. Yes, how I read, I said. So you removed it? No, he said quickly. I didn't find it. I didn't touch it, I swear. I believed him about that much. Rook was scared, but he was also proud. Proud men who steal like to feel clever about it. Rook didn't look clever. He looked trapped. Did Hetheridge go into Harlow's office? I asked. Rook hesitated. I didn't see him go in, but he was there, in the hall, watching, like he was waiting for someone to bring him something. That was better. I stood. Stay here, I told Rook. He gave me a look that said, you're not my father. I returned it with one that said no, but I might be your undertaker. I walked out, crossed the street again, and went back into the building. The receptionist started to rise, then saw my expression and thought better of it. Where's Paul Hetheridge? I asked. She licked her lips. Mister. Hetheridge is in a meeting. With whom? She hesitated. With Inspector Kramer. Of course. Kramer had finally found a man who wouldn't tell him to sit down. I moved down the hall toward the small conference room. The door was closed, but not fully latched. Voices leaked out like steam. Kramer's. You are the compliance officer. You expect me to believe you didn't know. Hetheridge's. I knew enough to object, Inspector. Not enough to prevent. Then, softer, almost inaudible, Hetheridge said something that made my skin prickle. And now the candle is loose. I didn't burst in. Wolfe would skin me alive if I did something crude and caused Hetheridge to clam up. Instead, I drifted past, casual, and headed for the stairwell. Halfway down, I took out my phone and called Wolfe. He answered on the second ring, voice calm as ever. Yes, Archie. Hetheridge is the thread, I said. He warned Rook to secure Harlow's insurance, and he just told Kramer the candle is loose. A pause. Not uncertainty. Wolfe seldom has that. But adjustment. Good, Wolfe said finally. Return at once. I'm not finished, I said. You are finished for the moment, Wolfe replied. There is a development here. That sounds ominous. It is merely irritating, Wolfe said. Mrs. Kwan's assurance of safety was premature. My grip tightened on the phone. What happened? Wolfe's voice lowered, and when Wolfe lowers his voice, it's never for drama, only for precision. Someone, he said, has attempted to communicate with her, inside my house. For a second, the stairwell seemed colder. How? I asked. A candle, Wolfe said softly. Lit. In the hall outside my office. I didn't speak, because if I did, it would have been something unprofessional. Wolfe filled the silence. And Archie, he added. It was not Fritz. I took the stairs 2 at a time, which for me counts as urgency. Wolfe doesn't exaggerate, and when he says someone has lit a candle in his hall, that's not a clue. That's an insult delivered with ceremony. The cab ride back to the brownstone felt longer than physics allows. I paid, didn't wait for change, and took the front steps in one bound, my hand already on the bell. Fritz opened the door before I touched it, his face pale in that restrained, dignified way that means he's furious but will never admit it. Mr. Archie, he said, stepping aside. You are expected. That's never good, I muttered, moving in. The house felt wrong. That's the only way to describe it. Not chaotic, nothing so vulgar, but unsettled, though like a room after someone's moved the furniture an inch and left. The air carried a faint, unmistakable sweetness. Beeswax. I followed it down the hall toward Wolfe's office. The candle had been extinguished, but its presence lingered, on the walls, on the carpet, in the idea of the place. Wolfe sat in his chair, hands folded on his stomach, eyes half-lidded. He looked like a man meditating on a personal affront. Celeste Kwan sat stiffly on the edge of a chair near the door, her face drawn but composed. Saul Panzer leaned against the bookcase, hat on, expression neutral and alert. If Saul was here, things had already crossed from irritating into strategic. Archie, Wolfe said. You are late. Traffic, I said. Also possibly an attempt at intimidation using household objects. Wolfe snorted. Some amateurish. I crossed to the hall and examined the spot where the candle had stood. The wax had dripped just enough to leave a mark, and the carpet bore the faintest scorch where someone had been careless or in a hurry. Who found it? I asked. Fritz, Wolfe said. At precisely 4:17. He was carrying a tray. The candle was lit, unattended. That rules Fritz out, I said. Obviously, Wolfe replied. Celeste Kwan spoke, her voice tight. It was meant for me. Yes, Wolfe agreed, and poorly executed. I turned to her. What did it say? She shook her head. I didn't see the shadows. Fritz extinguished it immediately. Good man, I said. Nevertheless, Wolfe said, the intent is clear. Someone wished to remind you of a system you designed. And to remind you, Saul added quietly, as that they can reach you here. That earned him a look from Wolfe. They cannot, Wolfe said. They can only pretend. I filled Wolfe in quickly. Rook, Hetheridge, the word insurance, the overheard phrase the candle is loose. Wolfe listened without interruption, which is always ominous. When I finished, Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Hetheridge, he said, a functionary with aspirations. He's meeting with Kramer now, I said. Or was. Kramer, Wolfe murmured. An irritant, but a useful one? Celeste Quan leaned forward. Paul Hetheridge didn't design the system, she said. He couldn't. No, Wolfe agreed. But he could exploit it, or believe he could. Saul straightened. You want him watched? I want him measured, Wolfe said. Observation without interference. That Archie has already irritated him sufficiently. I do have that effect, I said. Wolfe turned his head slightly toward Celeste Quan. Madame, your candle spoke once more today. That was imprudent. I didn't light it, she said quickly. I know, Wolfe said. The message was not for you to read, but for you to understand. She frowned. Understand what? That you are still considered a participant, Wolfe said, and therefore a liability. Her lips pressed together. I tried to stop it, and failed, Wolfe said, not unkindly. That is why you are here. I leaned against the desk. Let's talk timing. The candle appears after Harlow's death, after the candle disappears from Wolfe's desk, and after Hetheridge tells Rook to secure insurance. That's not coincidence. That's escalation. Indeed, Wolfe said. Someone believes events are slipping beyond his control. Saul spoke again. You think Hetheridge killed Harlow? Wolfe shook his head. No, I think Hetheridge benefited from the murder. That's a thin line, I said. Not at all, Wolfe replied. The murderer removed an obstacle. Hetheridge seized an opportunity. Celeste Quan's eyes widened slightly. Daniel Sloane. Yes, Wolfe said. The intended ruin. She nodded slowly. If Sloane were framed completely, if Harlow were dead and unable to contradict the narrative, then Hetheridge could present himself as the conscientious survivor, the man who tried to stop it, and maybe take over, I said. Or sell the remains, Wolfe said. Ruin is profitable. There was a knock at the door, sharp, official. Fritz entered, his posture stiff. Mr. Wolfe, he said. Inspector Kramer is here. As he insists. Wolfe sighed. Very well. Admit him. Kramer came in with his coat half on, hat in hand, looking like a man who'd been chasing a theory down an alley and lost it. We've got a problem, he said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Several. Please be specific. Kramer jabbed a finger toward Celeste Quan. She's been threatened. I'm aware, Wolfe said. In my hall. Kramer blinked. You knew. I know most things that happen in my house, Wolfe said. Eventually. Kramer turned to me. Hetheridge is dead. That landed hard. When? I asked. An hour ago, Kramer said. His apartment. Apparent suicide. Apparent, Wolfe echoed. Gunshot, Kramer said. Locked room, note. Ah, Wolfe said. A note. How thoughtful. Kramer scowled. Don't start. The note says he couldn't live with what he'd done. Mentions Harlow. Mentions guilt. And the candle? Wolfe asked. Kramer hesitated. There was wax on the desk. Silence followed. Thick, deliberate. Celeste Quan whispered. He didn't do it. No, Wolfe agreed. He did not. Kramer stared at him. You're saying it's staged? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that Mr. Hetheridge was eliminated once he ceased to be useful. By whom? Kramer demanded. Wolfe's eyes shifted to Celeste Kwan. By the man who understood the candle best. She shook her head slowly. No, Walter did. And Walter is dead, Wolfe said, leaving one man who observed without comprehending, who imitated without mastering. Elliot Rook, I said quietly. Wolfe nodded. A man who tidies. Kramer cursed. Rook has an alibi. So did Hetheridge, Wolfe said, until he did not. Kramer opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. You think Rook killed both of them? I think, Wolfe said carefully, that Rook attempted to secure insurance and discovered it implicated him more than it protected him. Panic followed. Panic is untidy. Saul spoke up. And the candle? A final message, Wolfe said. Not to Celeste Kwan, but to himself. Confirmation that the system still worked, that he could still control the narrative. But he can't, I said. No, Wolfe agreed, because he made one error. What's that? Kramer asked. Wolfe's eyes fixed on the darkened hall. He presumed that shadows reveal only what one intends. Wolfe shifted in his chair, settling deeper, immovable as ever. Archie, he said, you will bring Mr. Rook here. I grinned despite myself. Voluntarily? Wolfe's mouth curved slightly. Eventually. Kramer started to object, then stopped. He looked tired. I'll give you a leash, he said. A short one. That is generous, Wolfe replied. You may wait. Kramer blinked. Here. Yes, Wolfe said. Dinner is in an hour. I headed for the door, adrenaline humming. As I reached it, Wolfe added, almost idly, Archie, ensure Mr. Rook understands that candles are no longer necessary. I paused. Why's that? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Because the light is about to be very bright. I brought Elliot Rook in just after 7, which was considerate of dinner and inconsiderate of his nerves. He didn't come voluntarily in the philosophical sense, but he did come without cuffs, which in Wolfe's world counts as cooperation. Rook looked smaller in the brownstone than he had across the lunch table. The house does that. It presses in. Not physically, but intellectually. But people feel observed, even when Wolfe's eyes are closed. They were not closed now. Rook stood just inside the office, hat in hand, posture stiff with the expectation of accusation. Kramer sat off to one side, arms folded, watching like a man determined not to be impressed. Celeste Kwan sat straight-backed, hands folded, eyes on Rook with something between pity and contempt. Saul Panzer had positioned himself unobtrusively near the wall, which is Saul's way of being everywhere at once. Wolfe regarded Rook in silence for a full 10 seconds. That was deliberate. Wolfe understands that guilt hates quiet. Mr. Rook, Wolfe said at last, you are an untidy man. Rook blinked. What? You have devoted yourself to order, Wolfe continued mildly. Yet when confronted with true disorder, you responded with haste. As that is the mark of the amateur. Kramer snorted. Rook flushed. I didn't kill anyone. No, Wolfe agreed. You killed 2. The room tightened. That's insane, Rook said, too quickly, too loudly. Hetheridge killed Harlow, then he killed himself. Incorrect, Wolfe said. Mr. Hetheridge was eliminated. You staged his suicide. Rook laughed, a brittle sound. You can't prove that. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. Archie. I stepped forward. You told Rook to secure insurance. I said to no one in particular. You told him there was something dangerous in Harlow's office. You didn't tell him what it was. You let him imagine. Rook stared at me. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said. You found evidence of the candle system. Not the candle itself, that was already gone, but traces. You panicked. Yes, you thought if there was a system, then someone could read it. So you decided to control it. Wolfe took over smoothly. You lit a candle in my hall to reassure yourself. You wished to confirm that the mechanism still functioned. that shadows still spoke. Rook shook his head. I didn't. You did, Wolfe said calmly. And in doing so, you betrayed your hand. The candle was lit at the precise height and distance required to produce legible symbols. Mrs. Kwan recognized that immediately. Celeste Kwan nodded. It wasn't a warning, she said quietly. It was a test. Rook's eyes flicked to her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said. You never learned the system. You only learned enough to misuse it. Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. You believed Walter Harlow was manipulating events. When he threatened to ruin Daniel Sloane, you assisted. When you realized he planned to sacrifice you as well, through implication, through proximity, you intervened. I didn't mean to kill him, Rook said hoarsely. That is irrelevant, Wolfe replied. You confronted him. The letter opener was at hand. Your impulse exceeded your control. Kramer leaned forward. And Hetheridge? Wolfe nodded. Mr. Hetheridge believed himself clever. He believed that by warning Rook, by positioning himself as a reluctant witness, he could profit from the collapse. You realized this after the murder. You arranged his death to resemble remorse. Rook's shoulders slumped. The neatness had gone out of him entirely now. He was going to turn on me, he muttered. Yes, Wolfe said, and you could not tolerate disorder. Silence followed. Even Kramer didn't rush to fill it. Finally, Rook looked up. You can't prove all of this. Wolfe smiled faintly. On the contrary, you have already done so. He gestured with his eyes. Archie. I crossed to the desk and opened a small envelope. Inside was a thin strip of paper, translucent with wax residue. From Hetheridge's apartment, I said. Found in his desk drawer. You missed it when you tidied. It's an impression, left by a candle placed on paper repeatedly. The pattern matches the symbols Mrs. Kwan described. Kramer swore softly. Wolfe concluded, You thought shadows left no record. You were mistaken. Wax remembers. Rook sagged into the nearest chair. The fight gone. I just wanted it clean, he said. Wolfe regarded him with something approaching disdain. Justice is not cleanliness, it is accuracy. Kramer stood. So you're under arrest, he said. And this time there was no bluster, just procedure. As Rook was taken out, the house seemed to exhale. Fritz appeared at the door, composed once more. Dinner is served, he announced. Kramer hesitated. You're eating now? Yes, Wolfe said. The interruption has concluded. Kramer shook his head, but there was a grudging respect in it. One of these days, Wolfe. Yes, Wolfe said pleasantly. One of these days. When Kramer and Saul were gone and the house returned to its proper silence, Wolfe settled deeper into his chair. Celeste Kwan rose. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You may begin, Wolfe replied, by never designing such a system again. She smiled faintly. I won't. After she left, I lingered by the desk. You never really cared about the murder first. Yes, did you? Wolfe accepted his napkin from Fritz. Murder is crude. The greater crime was the presumption. Entering your desk? Yes, Wolfe said, and believing that intellect could be borrowed without consequence. I followed him to the dining room. What about the candle? Wolfe paused. Candles, he said thoughtfully, are useful, but they inevitably consume themselves. I grinned. And shadows. Reveal more than intended, Wolfe said, lifting his fork. Always. I sat down, appetite restored, and thought that for a house that hates disturbance, the brownstone had once again managed to teach the city a lesson, quietly, methodically, and with dinner still on time.